You do this because you want to share it. You want to influence other people. You want to have a conversation with other people. So in that sense, I think the most edifying part of it is when you see that you have achieved the goal of being part of that conversation.
Hello and welcome to the Beautiful Work Podcast. I am your host, Dan Krikorian. Each episode, we feature a special guest from all walks of life, and we ask them to explore the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the trials, and the triumphs in their chosen field. Writers, musicians, coaches, business owners, and everything in between. We peel back the curtain to hear their stories, to walk their paths, to find out how they breathe life into their beautiful work. Well, hello everybody. Excited as our plunky little podcast here continues to pick up some steam. We have a message and special offer from our show partner, JobStars USA. JobStars USA is a career services practice specializing in resume writing and career coaching for entry through executive level job seekers. JobStars works with job seekers from start to finish in the development of interview winning documents. So visit jobstars.com for more information. And fans of the Beautiful Work Podcast can receive 10% off any JobStars purchase by using the coupon code BEAUTIFUL10. That's capital B, BEAUTIFUL10. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this edition of the Beautiful Work Podcast. We have a great show today with one of the world's leading economists, Daron Acemoglu. And before we get to my conversation with Daron, a couple of quick announcements. If you are a fan of the show or becoming a fan of the show, one of the simple and free things you can do to help kind of keep this thing moving along is to subscribe on Apple iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are a fan of the show, if you could think about passing this along to someone else that you think might enjoy the show as well. It really does help grow the audience, and I would appreciate it. Besides doing the podcast, I'm also a musician and college basketball coach. On the musician side of things, a spin-off to this podcast has been the Beautiful Work Songwriter Showcase, which is kind of a high-end songwriter showcase with 4 different songwriters once a month at the 1888 Center in downtown Orange in the Orange Circle. And it's a really fun evening. And we have our next installment this Friday, as I'm recording this, February 21st, with Sister Speak, Manuel Goreja, Mike Teague, and myself. And you can get tickets. It's $10 at heritagefuture.org. You can also go to my website, dankrikorian.com, or check us out on Facebook for more information on the Songwriter Showcase. But it's a lot of fun and a great evening. All right, well, let's get to the show. And as mentioned, today, one of the world's leading economists and most cited economists, Daron Acemoglu. And Daron is out of MIT, and besides having an extensive and award-winning career in the field of economics, he's also a terrific writer and has books such as Why Nations Fail, that came out in 2012, and his newest book, The Narrow Corridor, came out in 2019. So he's here today to talk about his career in economics, his books, Why Nations Fail, The Narrow Corridor, and more, his newest views on artificial intelligence with the workforce, and much, much more. And so it is a fascinating conversation. So please enjoy my conversation with Daron. Daron, thanks so much for joining me this morning on the Beautiful Work Podcast.
Thank you, Dan. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to dive into a lot of stuff of your work and what you do. But one thing that you and I both share, which is fun, we are both of Armenian descent. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
You are?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, have you been to Armenia?
I have not, unfortunately, no. I grew up in Turkey, went to Armenian school, and I've been in the UK and the US after high school, but I have not been to Armenia. But I hope to be there at some point in the next 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, and what do you hope to do over there?
Oh, just, get to know the country, but also, in the context of understanding all of the economic, social, and political changes going on in the country at the moment.
You've done a lot of work recently, and you're continuing to do work on the future of AI and automation as that pertains to the labor market and to jobs. So, what do you see going forward with AI and automation are some of the most important skills that young people can develop as we move into the future of AI and automation?
Well, thanks for asking that, Dan, because, this is the topic that I've been thinking about most actively the last few months, at least. My work is in equal measure on sort of long run economic development, economic, political, and social aspects of long run changes in society, and on the effects of technology on various things in the economy, including prosperity, inequality, jobs, labor market. The two intersect sometimes, but they have their separate lives. And but then I go through periods where I think more intensively about one versus the other, and AI is what I've been really focused on for the last several months. And I think it's really a game changer, or it's going to be a game changer. I certainly don't think we are at a stage where AI is capable of doing many of the things that people say it can do yet, but it will get there, and I think we all have to be prepared for it. Some of it is in terms of what people invest in terms of skills. What the labor market will be like after artificial intelligence starts performing more of the tasks that humans used to do. I think we don't know, but we broadly understand that there are going to be greater demands for flexibility, for understanding how to combine human comparative advantages such as creativity, judgment, together with machine intelligence, and also greater specialization in niche skills that humans will be able to do, or are able to do, but machines are not going to be able to do anytime soon. Such as being able to sort of combine various types of specialized mental and judgment-based activities together with physical activities. So many service occupations have those sorts of combinations. But even more fundamentally, I think, and this is where we are even less prepared. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are completely unprepared when it comes to the types of skills and the types of adjustments that young people should be making right now and aren't making, or in fact, actually middle-aged people should be making and aren't making. But we are even less prepared in terms of how we should think about good governance of AI. What are the norms that should guide us in interacting, creating, deploying AI technologies in the military, in surveillance, and in the job market, in privacy-related issues, in entertainment? What are the political responses we should be developing in response to AI, and how the international arena is going to interact with all of these things? I really think there are voices here that are raising these issues, but by and large, I think U.S. society is completely asleep at the wheel. We haven't really taken important steps and important considerations into account in thinking about what the future is going to hold.
And why do you think that is? Why is the U.S. kind of behind, say, other countries in that forward thinking?
Well, I think if we had 2 hours instead of half an hour, I would get into the other part of my research, which is about how U.S. has become a completely dysfunctional political system, and I think that's largely responsible. We have really been completely focused on short-termist issues, wealth creation for the very rich who have become politically extremely dominant, and expertise, which is actually used to be quite plenty in the U.S. civil service bureaucracy for decades, has been less vocal because I think it has been disadvantaged relative to the private sector, especially the Silicon Valley, and of course, we have a criminal, disastrous president at the moment, and I think it has drained the U.S. bureaucracy out, of its expertise to a large extent. So we are continuing to be asleep at the wheel. But here, I don't actually blame Trump. I think the situation was pretty bad under Obama as well, as far as thinking about these issues goes. But I think the short of it is that AI is here. New technologies are being rolled out in terms of their applications in social media, their applications in surveillance, face recognition. Military technology is more advanced than many people recognize, and it's not there yet with autonomous fighting robots, but obviously there's something that's going to be in the cards. And what is the set of principles we have to apply so that all of these new technologies in new domains have to be used ethically, taking into account their social consequences? I think that's a discussion we need to have very soon.
So let's say 80 years from now, the year 2100, if the U.S. and the world gets it right, where we find a synergy between working with AI and good policies around it, what would that look like to you, as far as what would the labor market look like, where we've been able to have synergy between the two and humans are able to work alongside automation? What's the best case scenario?
I wish I could tell you for 2100. I can't tell you that. That's really way
too far
beyond what I am able. But I can have a go, for say 2050, with the usual proviso that this is part science fiction. So I think it's hard to take it too seriously. But I think we have to think about these issues. I think the best case scenario is that we have developed AI and other technologies, including robotics, as it intersects and interplays with AI and other autonomous machines, in a way that they are highly productive in the tasks that they perform, and they are complementary to the things that humans do, so that we have some sort of synergy between machine and human intelligence. So there are three considerations that are underpinning this statement, and let me try to be explicit about them. Mm-hmm. One of them is that I don't believe that at least in 30 years, or actually in 50, 70 years, we are going to be at a place where artificial intelligence is going to be, is going to take the form of super intelligence, where, machines can program machines and do pretty much everything that humans do. But the machines are going to be able to do very well in many, 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 many tasks. But the question is which tasks and in what way. So since, if you take this presumption, since they're not going to be able to do all of the things that humans do as well, it opens the possibility that they can develop in a way that is complementary to humans. They can do the things that humans have a hard time. Mm-hmm. But in the process, also, they can increase the productivity of humans. Let me give you an example from robotics. Robots are extremely good at certain tasks, and those tend to be the tasks that humans were able to do, but they were dangerous for humans. They were physically demanding, and at the same time, they did not necessarily have the same level of fidelity as the robots are able to perform. So in workplaces where robots have been successfully deployed, workers are actually pretty happy because robots are doing some of the tasks that were hard and dangerous for them. But on the other hand, it is important that humans are capable of performing other tasks that are complementary to robotics. And again, if you look at across workplaces and across countries, there is a great deal of variety in that. In some places, robots have taken over, wholesale, and in some cases, not so productively. Tesla is an example. And in other places, there has been a real synergy between robots are doing certain set of tasks and humans are performing some certain complementary tasks, and both sides, both the firm and workers benefit from this interaction. So I think that is the possibility, and that's the first consideration that I'm saying. Well, I think we can develop AI in a way that's complementary to humans. The second consideration or presumption or consideration that I have in my mind is that we can do so in an ethical direction. So I think the ability of governments and companies to monitor, control, manipulate humans is huge. And if that happens, I think it undermines the dream of the synergy between humans and machines. And in that sense, it is critical that the two first considerations that I have articulated really advance simultaneously, that we find the right applications where machines can be deployed productively but still synergistically with humans, and at the same time we regulate and control their unethical and potentially socially destructive applications. And and both on the first and the second, I think we are not making enough progress. And then the third consideration that's at the background here is that it's almost a dictum that AI technology is extremely malleable, that you can actually develop it in very, very different ways. You can do it for surveillance, you can do it for empowering people, you can use it to destroy democracy, you can use it to and strengthen democracy, you can use it to create these synergies between human and machine intelligence, or you can use it to try to eliminate humans, and it will be not so productive and not so good for our economy and society. But those are all possible directions. So these three considerations together are the basis of my statement earlier that the governance of AI is very important. So now you asked me for my best case scenario, and I just gave it to you. And do I think that best case scenario is likely? No, not at the moment, because we are letting a handful of companies impose their vision of using AI for replacing humans. And so the synergistic machine-human intelligence is not as likely as a result of that. We're letting the US government, companies, and the Chinese government dictate how surveillance, monitoring, manipulation are feasible and actually likely for AI to go in that direction. We're not bringing the regulatory roadblocks, speed bumps on the way that's necessary for a more ethical direction for AI, and we're really going in the direction of developing AI in a very narrow way rather than the broader and potentially more productive way of making it work for humans and with humans.
Well, really interesting. And thank you for that detailed answer. I know it's something that you've been very passionate about over the last couple of years in your career, looking into it. And so I know there's a lot going forward with it. Pivoting just a little bit, your newest work, The Narrow Corridor, where you talk about the path to liberty being in this narrow corridor, and for institutions and countries to try to find that right path. Could you talk a little bit about that book and about what the narrow corridor is?
Thank you. Yes, and that's really the sort of the other part of my research, which is about the long run development of institutions, economic arrangements, economic prosperity, poverty, uh, and really it sort of comes from the same source. I am fascinated by social science because it is a window into understanding how we can make our world better and how we've actually gotten to this place, which is better than many things we've experienced in the past, but still highly imperfect. And I think one of the great achievements of humans, if you think about it, is some loose set of arrangements and ideas we can term liberty. This sort of possibility that we have the right, the capability, and the opportunities for making our own decisions. That is such a unusual thing. Obviously, it doesn't apply to any other species than humans. And if you look at humans in the past, they are actually not very often in situations that you would describe as liberty. And that's not because the demand for making own autonomous decisions and having opportunities is absent. In fact, if you go back to ethnographic studies, anthropological studies, historical studies, as well as analysis of societies today, you see that demand being very, very real all the time. It is there, but it is a very difficult thing for it to emerge. If you look at human history, much of our existence on this planet as Homo sapiens has been in the context of what anthropologists call small-scale societies, without states, without laws. And it is a situation where either you have the rule of the strong at the expense of the weak, or more often you have the sort of potential conflicts and disputes regulated by a very tight set of traditions and norms. And neither of those are conducive to liberty. If you have this, the rule of the strong against the weak, much of the population doesn't have any possibility to make their own choices. They live under constant threat of violence, and they don't have opportunities. And when you have these norm-based strict orders, again, individual choices are tightly restricted, and there are deep social hierarchies. Now, when states, as we recognize them, or in their primitive form, start emerging in human history, mm-hmm. they have some sort of laws, and they have top-down order, but that doesn't bring any type of liberty. Now you have a more institutionalized form of the strong imposing their will on the weak, and that's why for most of the history of humans under states, you have individuals trying to flee, trying to limit the state's ability to regulate them, to impose taxes, or to impose specific types of laws on them. But somehow, and that's where the narrow corridor comes in, between these two overwhelming sort of imposition on humans, either from norms without states or from powerful states, there is a corridor that opens up in which the preconditions of liberty start evolving. And the way that we conceptualize this, we here is myself and my frequent collaborator, James Robinson, mm-hmm. is that this narrow corridor is this fragile balance between states and societies. And you need this balance, and you need both of them to be participatory and active in the organization of people's lives. Why is that? Well, you need states because without the state's ability to resolve disputes and conflicts via well-defined laws, we're back to what I described earlier, the rule of the strong or some version of that. So laws are critical. But as my account of early state-based order suggests, when you have laws imposed by strong states, that's going to be often used for the benefit of whoever the ruler is. So you need society with its norms, with its political organization, with its mobilization, and lately over the last 200 years, through its institutionalized form of democratic participation, you need society to be active in politics so that it actually restricts what states and rulers do. And that conjunction is the essence of the balance, is the essence of the corridor. But if I could add one more thing,
Yes.
and this is why the book is long, because we have to explain this whole history and the conceptual framework. This is not a static balance. The key thing, and this is what we try to capture with the notion of the Red Queen effect, is that you need the constant evolution of both state and society. And that's partly because there is this constant tussle between state and society. No ruler wants its ability to shape society and its ability to raise taxes and increase its prestige to be constrained by upstart individuals democratically participating or protesting against it. But at the same time, even more importantly, what we demand from well-functioning states, high-capacity states, changes. Imagine what we expect from our governments today versus what governments were able to do or were expected to do 100 years ago. And so as we demand more from the states themselves need to evolve, but societies need to evolve in order to be able to keep accountable and monitor states that have now taken on more responsibility.
Absolutely. Well, it's a fascinating read and really important right now. I know as it came out last year in our time of democracy in the United States, an interesting look at that corridor and where we go from the future. Pivoting a little bit towards your career, and you've had an extensive career and done so much, won so many awards and spoken all over the world. What's one of the best investments that you've made in your career so far?
Well, that's a hard question. I think it's everything in academia, actually in a lot of areas in which, we work as a professional. It's so cumulative that, if you really force yourself to answer that question, you're bound to say early investments. I got into social science because as a teenager growing up in Turkey, I got fascinated with these questions. Turkey was under a military dictatorship at the time. Economically, it was dysfunctional, unequal. Free speech was under serious pressure. And so I started worrying about or wondering about, how these things are related. Is it connected that Turkey is unable to maintain a democratic system and the fact that it's also not able to grow economically and bring prosperity to the vast fraction of its population? And so those questions were the ones that actually took me into social science, into economics. And in some sense, even though I didn't understand much at the time, the early readings and thinkings I did, both as a teenager and then as a university student, I think they were important because they were building blocks. But of course, I continued to read, I continued to think, I continued to do my own research, and they all sort of becoming part of that building effort where you're building an edifice in terms of knowledge and in terms of understanding, imperfect though it may be.
Of all the things that you do in economics, writing as a professor in the social sciences, what brings you the most joy?
I think that's a great question too. I find writing very draining. In some sense, you need to really focus, thinking thoughts, thinking creatively, in fact, even is much easier than writing. But at the end of the day, I think there's a view among some people that you do things, it's just like art. Art you do for yourself, science you do for yourself. I agree with that to some degree, but it's only part of the story. It's really the sharing. You do this because you want to share it. You want to influence other people. You want to have a conversation with other people. So in that sense, I think the most edifying part of it is when you see that you have achieved the goal of being part of that conversation, that people are actually reading and thinking and talking about what you have done, and you're part of that conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of the Beautiful Work Podcast. Subscribe to the show on Apple iTunes, and also subscribe to our newsletter at dankrikorian.com or beautifulworkpodcast.com and become a fan of the show. All the music used in today's episode are instrumental versions of songs off of one of my 5 records, and you can find those albums on iTunes as well under Dan Krikorian. Thank you guys so much for listening. And wherever you're doing, wherever you are, keep making beautiful work. We'll see you next time.